What's good, Mets fans? Welcome back to another edition of Straight Outta Flushing. Your boy Dexter Henry, joined by my guy Tyler Ward, aka Wardy. Wardy, what's up, man? How you doing?
Dex, I'm feeling great. How are you?
I'm good. Look, World Baseball Classic is sort of started. Got some exhibition games going on. Mets, they're still rolling through spring training, so we are closer. We're just, at the time of recording this, just over 3 weeks till the start of spring training. The weather's starting to get a little bit warmer. I'm over this cold, Wardy.
Me too.
Baseball is in the air. I'm excited, man. I'm good.
I'm amped, and I'm so amped because not only do we have ourselves a fun discussion today, getting into the youngsters for the New York Mets, including Carson Benge. What is he doing when looking at the position battle for right field? Christian Scott, what is he doing trying to battle it out for a roster spot for the Mets this spring? But most of all, what I'm most excited about is just knowing that Mets baseball is basically back and seeing what other guys are doing, like Juan Soto hitting bombs in the WBC right now. I'm locked in. I just need more baseball. And Dex, let's get this conversation started.
Yeah, man, let's get started. You heard from Wardy. We're going to talk about some young players. Christian Scott, Carson Benge. Did some good things. Let's get into it. Wardy, your boy, Carson Benge, had himself a really good day. Homer in the exhibition against Israel for Team USA. Great spot for a young player to do this. We want to see so much from this guy. We both would like to see him take the starting job in right field. Kind of looks like he might be on his way. I guess what I want to ask you is, I said that and I caught myself and I'm like, wait, does what he does in the WBC, do you look at that? Does that matter for you in terms of him making this Mets roster and possibly being the starting right fielder?
You know, it's a great question because when we think of spring training a lot, we think of, okay, it's that time of year where players are just starting to get ramped up. They're just focusing on certain pitches that they're going to throw for their arsenal, or hitters are going to be focusing on timing and on many other things. So you have to take this kind of year with a grain of salt with all results. Having said that, spring training and the WBC exhibition games, what the importance for them is for position player battles. And this is what we talked about before. So when you have a guy like Carson Benge, who's been broken down by Stearns, by Mendoza, and others, reiterating that we're going to give him every opportunity to succeed, but he still has to go ahead and win it and prove it at the end of the day. That's why what he did today was notable, and we should break it down, because regardless of the fact that he did it in an exhibition game against Team Israel, against a southpaw that you probably never heard of, think about it. It's lefty-lefty, opposite field. That is what is so good about Carson Benge, because again, and I've said this to you, Dexter, but I need everyone to pay attention. This is so important. Having the ability to have a multi-tool athlete in your outfield will do wonders for you, okay? Luis Robert, who we're going to talk about a lot this year, for example, is primed and known to have that multi-tool talent, from elite base running to defense to when right at bat that can be unbelievably dominant. But as we know, he's been Jekyll and Hyde the past couple years. Benge is unique because not only do you have the defensive upside with someone who can play right, can play center, can play left, where you're not really looking at it as a liability. He's a very strong base runner too, so he can be a guy that sneakily steals you 20 to 30 bags this year if he was really actually playing the whole season. Like, he can do a lot of unique things for you. I mean, before you write it off and say, oh, Tyler, that's nonsense, Benge won't do that. I'm like, really? If Juan Soto can get almost 40 stolen bases last year after...
Well, we did not see that coming.
No one saw that coming. That's my point, though. If that can happen with a player like him, who his previous career best was 12, I'm inclined to believe that Carson Benge is going to be just fine with his base running, with Gilbert Gomez, newly appointed Mets coach there at first base, especially because Gilbert Gomez has worked with Carson Benge. They worked together just this past year, as Gomez was the manager of the AA Rumble Ponies, whereas the Cyclones, one of the two, I apologize, in helping them win their championship. Benge has a familiarity and a rapport with them already. And when we talk about stolen bases, it's actually hilarious because Gilbert Gomez and the club that he managed there in the minor leagues, they were second in all of their league in stolen bases. So there's a lot of fun wrinkles to this when we think of just the internal connections as well as what the Mets are trying to build. Because, you know, we talked about how, you know, the Mets really want to hone in on homegrown talent, right?
Yes.
And that's a very important thing for them. But what's also important is the staff being homegrown as well. And it's not just Gilbert Gomez at first base that'll help guys like Benge and others. It's the fact that collectively, a lot of their hires this past year have been in-house to a certain degree, including Jeff Albert, who's coming in for the major league level now to impact more things on the hitting front. So it's exciting times for the Mets, but to basically put a pin in it from my points on Benge right now, what he's doing in spring training is notable because when you look at who he's competing against, these are some good players. Mike Tauchman could easily be the Mets starting right fielder, and no one would really be complaining about that to begin the season. I mean, you shouldn't.
There'll be some people complaining. We talked about it, but there'll be.
I know.
I've seen it in the comments.
They don't know ball. They don't know ball, Dex.
I've seen people already like, if Benge isn't starting, then what's going on here? I know you've seen some of that already, too. And we both, to be clear, we want Benge to start.
Right.
But I'm with you. He's competing against some good guys. I didn't mean to cut off your point, but people are going to go crazy about this.
Oh, they're 100%. Listen. The Mets could win every single game throughout the regular season, and you will still get hate saying, what, they couldn't add a couple games and win them too?
That's fair.
This is always going to be the dynamic with Mets fans. But I want to hear from you with Carson Benge. When you look at what he's been doing so far with all of his tools versus the other outfielders that are competing, including Brett Beatty, who's getting some right field reps today in the backfield today, because the Mets are going to make sure that he's Mr. Utility for them, like McNeil from years past. You, of course, have MJ Melendez, who's on the outside looking in, but he's had a really good spring at this point offensively. You also have Tyrone Taylor, even though he's more of a guy you want in center. If he's going to be on this roster, you amplify the versatility that comes with him to play left, to play right, whatever the case may be. So when you look at all their outfield configuration options and Carson Benge, how are you feeling at this point in time?
I'm feeling good. I think today, and I understand some people are going to say, hey, Dex, this is an exhibition against Team Israel, but lefty on lefty was impressive, and then going oppo, really impressive for the young player. You got to think Carson Benge might be the leader in the clubhouse here for this right field spot, which we want to see. It is still very early, but I feel good about it. I will reiterate what we said in the last episode a little bit. Mike Tauchman is a professional hitter. For those out there that think that he's not, he is, and he's going to get on base. And I'm inclined to agree with my man Wardy here in saying that I think he makes the team because that is so valued within the Mets organization. So that makes me feel good. Now, the big question is, where does that leave Tyrone Taylor? And we talked about that as well, too. But I think just having this competition, having these group of guys, and the versatility you have among these guys is really good. I'm not even mentioning MJ Melendez. I'm not trying to shade him and leave him out here. But as you said, he's had a really dope spring. He's shown something. I think he's on the outside looking in right now. I'm with you, but you got to feel good about how Benge is responding. Let's go back to something you said in the last episode. You talked about the mentality of Carson Benge and how you believed he could respond to this. Well, we've seen what he's been able to do with the Mets. He hits this home run, and this is going to be good for him to grow up. But his mentality going into that and saying, I got to produce, and then doing it, lefty against lefty, really impressive. So if you're part of the Carson Benge fan club, which we are, you should feel good about this. But I think you should feel good about the competition overall in the group. At least I do. I like competition. Competition is healthy. It's good for whatever we do, right? Even in creating content. We're going to look at what our competitors are doing and not hating on them, but we're like, all right, how do we get better? How do we do what we need to do? And I think this is what happens here, and this is good for the Mets. So I've good vibes for me about this. We'll see if Carson Benge can do it. There's a long way still to go. Remember, we're only just over 3 weeks till the start of opening day, but I think Benge is the leader in the clubhouse right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And you talk about leadership, I think that's something that Benge is going to seamlessly show over time with being on this Mets team. Not that he needs to be the leader, not that we want him to be the leader, but naturally, I think how he's going to carry himself again, not too high, not too low, just right, like the Bears' favorite porridge, right? I really think that Benge is going to put himself in a position where he's going to just smoothly transition the clubhouse with the teammates, with the players, and go about his game the way that he knows how, and then let the results speak for itself.
Yeah, and I really think the fact when you talked about the mentality, I just think that's so dope to know how the young man is comporting and carrying himself right now. If he comes into a clubhouse full of veterans, and I know people questioning leadership things with the Mets, but there are good leaders on this team. And if you have a young guy that's coming in and carrying himself that kind of way, it's gonna do well for the team. He's also gonna see how other great players throughout the MLB, American-born players, are carrying themselves at the WBC. That's why the WBC is important. I know you and I, we're fans of the WBC, but it's why it's important. Okay, other guy we got to talk about. Got to talk about Christian Scott. 2 innings, scoreless ball. I said it. I think this guy is going to have a factor in this Mets season. But here's my question for you, Wardy. Is this a guy who's going to make the opening day roster? Should he be on the opening day roster and part of the starting rotation? Or is Christian Scott, we're just looking at somebody who's going to come up later and maybe help this team if somebody goes down to injury? We mentioned a Tyler McGill comp with upside on the last episode. But if he's pitching like this, do you think there's a chance he could crack the starting rotation?
You know, it's a great question because he hasn't pitched much since June of 2024 when he went down with that Tommy John reconstructive surgery. And to see him come out here today, go 2.2 shutty, 5 strikeouts, topping out 97 on the gun already, having the entire kitchen sink of his arsenal with the 3 S's you love, whether it's, going to be sweepers, sliders, sinkers. The other S that Mets pitchers and especially their staff love is splitters. I go with the 4 S's. If you got S's in your arsenal, it's usually a good thing for the Mets pitching staff because they like to work with that. And Scott displayed all that beautifully, and not only does he have a high-rising fastball where it can be deceptive, where if you say throwing it around 95 consistently as he gets to the batter, it could be looking a bit more 97, 98 in the way that comes off the hand and gets from the mound to the actual plate. So that's a very exciting thing about him. You'll also think about Christian Scott and how he has so many innings that he has yet to give you because he really does not have a lot on his arm yet.
Right.
Yes, he had his surgery, but that was a surgery that was pushed, that was supposed to happen multiple years ago, okay? So this was something that they pushed even when they were in the minor leagues, when he was dominating for the Mets in 2023 in the minors, saying, hey, we're going to push this surgery because we really do think that you could be a viable piece for us as soon as the following season. That held true basically until their hand was forced, and they just felt it was the best route to go down with Christian because the Mets, as we know, in the 2024 season, of course, as the year went on, there was a lot of fluctuation, and they went from being really bad to being really good. Unfortunately, Christian Scott didn't get to experience the fun down the stretch for them that year, but now he may have an opportunity to do that this time around. And the logjam is the rotation, Dexter, as we know this. There's 6 options right now, and none of them are named Christian Scott. So for that reason alone, I do not think Christian Scott is going to crack the rotation for opening day. I think he's on the outside looking in. But I think it's not going to be long before he's impacting the Mets. Either it's because he does crack a bullpen spot that the Mets would like him in as a multi-inning piece, or they're going to keep him stretched in AAA to begin the season, which is probably the logical route that they're going to go down, and then deem best fit throughout how he's looking his first month in there. So I don't think it's a matter of if Christian Scott will impact the Mets this year, but rather when. And to your point asking about opening day, it's a great question with the early looks he's giving, and maybe he does force the Mets' hand. Listen, if Christian Scott dominates for the remainder of spring training and he just looks lights out and everything's looking comfortable, he's fully healthy, and there's nothing holding him back from trying to be the best version of himself right now, the Mets could be in a really difficult position, but in a good way. You want tough decisions if you're Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, right?
It's a good problem to have, right? So for me, I think the encouraging thing from today with him was obviously you want to see him get through 2 innings clean, no issues, but the velocity was there. That's impressive, right? That he hit as high as 97 on the gun. You saw it consistently there. Now, here's the thing. Can't go crazy over one appearance. He's about putting it together. You mentioned something I hadn't even thought about. I do think the more likely thing is that he goes down, they keep him stretched out, and they'll be ready for him to be used. But bullpen's a possibility. We talked about that in the last episode, right? We talked about the bullpen battles. If you can get an arm like Christian Scott, he can give you 2, maybe he's even a longer man, give you 3 innings, and he can give you that kind of velocity. That's a huge win for this Mets bullpen. Now, the question is, do you want to use him like that? Do you still project him more long-term as a starter? There's a lot of questions there, but what if I told you, I know this is a long shot too, but what if he's going to make the opening day roster? What if it's in the pen, not starting?
Yeah, listen, if it's in the pen and not starting, then the Mets have clearly established that, 1, they value him highly, that they want him on the roster right away. But 2, that how they view him to start the year means that they are not looking at him as a viable starter option because they don't need him to be that.
Right.
The reason why I think I'll be a little surprised if he cracks the roster to begin the year in the bullpen is solely because of what I mentioned when it comes to length. If you have a starter that goes from being stretched out as a starter to a reliever, and then you ask at some point throughout the year for him to be stretched out again, typically for pitchers, that's far more difficult to try to swing in the course of a 162 than vice versa. Whereas why the Mets are going to have Tobias Myers stretched out as a starter all spring at minimum, and then once the regular season begins, he's going to be in the Mets bullpen in essentially that role where he could eat a couple innings for you.
Yeah, which is a role we think he could be extremely successful.
Very much so.
Valuable that it's going to be for the Mets rotation. But you're with me, you think Scott's going to be up here
Yes.
and contributing to this team. You said sooner rather than later. it's going to be very interesting because it could be a health issue. It could just be he's pitching lights out down at Syracuse.
Things inevitably happen. He's going to find his way up here one way or another.
Yeah, he's going to find his way. All right, so two good young players for the Mets fans to really keep their eye on. Look, I know a lot of you are going to keep your eye on Carson Benge. You got to keep your eye on Christian Scott as well, too. There's no doubt about that. But this was just a little chat for myself and Wardy. We appreciate you joining us here on this one. This was a good conversation, Wardy. We're going to have a lot more. Baseball's almost here.
Baseball's almost here. Let's let it rip, Dexter. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Let's let it rip. All right. That's my man, Tyler Ward. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of Straight Outta Flushing.